everyone. Welcome and welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay. Here at Cafe Oleh with Nefesh, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need in Israel to succeed, whether that is reading and paying your bills, growing grocery shopping and reading nutritional labels, keeping up with the news, striking up a conversation, flirting, dating, complaining, job interviewing, all the everyday things you do in your native language, in your country of origin, but here in Israel in modern Hebrew. As always, we'd love to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. You can always be in touch with us by email at hebrew@nbn.org.il. That's HEBREW @nbn.org.il. You can also see all of our previous lessons up on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com, type in Cafe Oleh. The very first search result will be a link to our playlist of all of our previous lessons. There's now 126 or 7 classes there. I think we're around 19,000 views altogether. You can go through them at your convenience. This class will be uploaded in the next day or two. And the last 60 or so classes will have the vocabulary spreadsheet that we go through in each class attached to it. So we definitely recommend that you go through all of our previous lessons, whether or not you've requested something to at least see if we've done it before, or if we haven't done it before, or if there's a specific topic within a class we haven't done before. Highly recommend watching. Those of you who would like to practice speaking and listening, we have our Wednesday classes. Same time on Wednesdays here on Zoom, where you are into groups based on your proficiency level, and we incorporate whatever the lesson is on Monday into Wednesday's practice. So I'm going to talk about that at the end of the class, at the top of the hour, along with next week's topic. For those of you who decide not to join, absolutely welcome. Our conversation classes are growing. They are off the record. They are not recorded. So you are encouraged not only to join, but to make as many mistakes as possible, ask as many questions you want. It's a much smaller group than our group here, which is an amazing one at currently 236 participants learning live. Today's going to be a little bit of grammar, but it's an important grammar lesson. It's not going to be quite as, I hope, not going to be as head rattling as our previous one on prepositions and conjunctions, because all we're doing now is talking about one tense. And when we talk about tenses, that may sound odd for some of us, especially those of us who only speak English. In English, we really only have the past, present, and future. And even then, we don't necessarily have separate conjugations for each one, right? If I write in the present, I wrote in the past, and I will write in the future, right? We use the same construct, write, in both the present and the future. We just attach a word to it to indicate a different tense. And we have that in English. You have to repeat them. Some of them are, they end with ed. Some of them don't, like write. Write is wrote. Drink is drank. I certainly remember repeating those tables of verbs in elementary school. I'm sure some of you as well. And those of you who know other languages, you know that each tense has its own unique conjunction. Those of you who've studied Romance languages, you know everything from the imperfect to the preterite to the conditional to the perfect to the subjunctive even. English has gotten away with a lot of that, done away with a lot of that for good and not good. Hebrew is somewhere in the middle, in that we have ways to attach words to indicate some of those tenses. And there's one tense in particular that's a really important one in Hebrew that in English you'll see as quote unquote simple, but in Hebrew it's a much more, it's a deeper and descriptive way to describe things and to talk about actions, which is called, the fancy word is imperative. Imperative simply means commands, right? How do we say fill in the blank action, exclamation point? That's all we're trying to say, right? Stop, go, speak, shut up. All those things are indicated as you say it with an exclamation point. In Hebrew, it's called the tzivui. Tzivui is simply the command or the imperative form. We're going to look in Hebrew at modern Hebrew today, what it is, how to recognize it, how to create it, and also some ways that are considered similar to the command form that we've actually already reviewed a few weeks ago. And this is all going to be a preview for Wednesday's conversation class, where you're going to not only practice, but create your own commands. So with that, I'm going to open up today's spreadsheet. You are welcome to follow along. You are welcome to screenshot old school pen and paper if you would like, or simply just follow along and wait for your own version of this in a PDF form. This version is going to look a little different than our previous lessons because, again, I want to indicate here as clearly as possible, and I'm going to move this so you can see even better. There we go, and move you way even better. We have as with all our spreadsheets, we're going to have now not just a top line, but also a sideline, and it's really important. The top line is going to indicate how we construct something and what it means in English. On the left-hand side, you're going to see specifically the English word we're talking about and the infinitive verb. A lot of the expressions we're going to go through today use the infinitive form of a verb. The infinitive is simply to do something. It's called infinitive because it's not defined through conjugation by time or space, right? As the first one says here, lidaber. Lidaber means to speak, right? And what we're looking at here are examples of how to say speak, exclamation point, in Hebrew, to which we have several different ways. Okay, so as you see here, the very first column on the left is English. The X, you're gonna have to use a little bit of your junior high school algebra here. Okay, X is gonna stand for the value we're talking about, in this case, speak. Okay, so in our first row here of verbs, number two, X is gonna mean speak. Okay, so if I'm saying the infinitive and it says to X, that means to speak. Okay, because we're going to go through multiple examples of how to create commands. If you have questions, by the way, while I'm talking about this specific class, please write it in the Q&A. If you have questions about anything else, please keep it in the chat, and also please keep the personal conversation not connected to Hebrew or our classes here or on Wednesdays to a minimum. With that, so you have here on the left-hand side, like I said, the English, and we're going to first start with the infinitive. The infinitive gives us a lot of direction when we're kind of trying to construct certain forms of the command. Okay, so first we're going to start off with the verb ledaber. Ledaber means to speak or to talk. Okay, if it's used in the command form, talk, speak, exclamation point, as you see here in big bold letters on the left. We're going to first start with the classic, and the classic is what we call the imperative form. The imperative form is its own conjugation. Okay? You're going to also see, by the way, a lot of blanks in this chart, not because I got lazy, but because a lot of times the same verb doesn't appear in both the imperative and the other form that we use for commands. So first off, the imperative. The imperative is its own conjugation. In this case, if you want to say second person you masculine, speak you, right? You masculine speak, daber, 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 however you say the letter resh, daber. You second person female singular, dabri, and you multiple people, second person, regardless of gender, dabru. This is all we have in modern Hebrew, okay? Second person masculine singular, second person feminine singular, second person mixed group, or all male or all female. Okay, these are the only three we use in modern Hebrew. In ancient Hebrew, there is a command form for an all female group. In modern Hebrew, it's rarely used, so I'm not teaching it here. Okay, very important. When we talk about the command, we're only talking about the second person in Hebrew. When we say second person, all I mean is you, Y-O-U. Whether that's singular, plural, masculine, feminine, second person means you. That is a command. You are telling someone what to do. That is all we mean by the imperative or the command form. That's it. So, daber, dabri, dabru. You notice here it's filled in. This is a verb that is used in modern Hebrew in its imperative form. That's a very important distinction. Okay. We have another way to create a command. And this one in modern Hebrew is much more frequent. You're going to see a lot more. And it really should be seen as the default, and it's much easier to think about. The default command form in modern Hebrew is the, as it says here, future tense second person. Okay. Tidaber, tidabri, tidabru. Tidaber, masculine second person singular. Tidabri, feminine second person singular. Tidabru, mixed gender plural second person. Okay. This happens to be the future tense. If you've never learned the future tense, I'd like you to meet. Okay. In modern Hebrew, when you say tidaber, depending on its context, it can mean you will speak or you will speak, exclamation point, as in speak, right? Because we're talking about the command form here. Right? Daber or tidaber. If you see both verbs here, that means that both are understood in the command form in modern Hebrew. You can use either the imperative form, daber, dabri, dabru, or the future tense second person, tidaber, tidabri, tidabru. Simple as that. Let's keep going with daber so you see its full scope. So here we have speak in the imperative form, speak in the future tense, and now we're going to have don't speak. Okay? Don't speak. Don't speak is formed with two parts. The first is the word al. Al with an aleph does not mean anything. Okay, let's be very clear here. First off, spelling is very important. This was with an aleph, and it's al. That's it. Al followed by the future second person means don't do something, exclamation point. In this case, al tidaber, al tidabri, al tidabru, don't speak, exclamation point. Okay, no matter what form of the positive imperative you're using, daber or tidaber, if you're negating it, i.e. don't speak, al tidaber, al tidabri, al tidabru, no exceptions. Al plus the future second person is don't do something. Remember, folks, again, before I get questions about this, we're talking about modern Hebrew in this class. Please don't come at me with the 10 Commandments. Please don't come at me with Bible. Those are all important parts of the development of Hebrew, but this class is specifically about modern Hebrew. This is how we create the command form known as tzivui in Hebrew. Yes, it's related to the word mitzvah, commandment. We're going to get to that towards the end of class. Okay, so now we know how to say positively something as a command. Now we know how to say it negatively. Al tidaber. Tidaber, speak. Al tidaber, don't speak. And it has to be negated and written in this way. Al with an aleph, tidaber, 2 words. Now we're going to go through some examples we've actually done in the past, and specifically in our class on non-gendered communication. If you remember, we had these 2 constructs, yesh plus the infinitive and ein plus the infinitive. This is why I kept the infinitive as the running tab on the left-hand side, so the running column rather, so you can see how it's created. Yesh ledaber. One must speak. When we use the word yesh, which normally means there is, in front of an infinitive verb, it means there is, literally means there is to do something, but in everyday language, one must do something. We can think of this as a command. It is not considered a command in the strictest sense linguistically for Hebrew, but when it's used, and you will see it in signage throughout Israel, on buses, in stores, in the newspaper, one must do something, right? We're taking that as a command or instruction to do something, right? יש לתקף כרטיס בעת עלייה לרכבת. One must validate your ticket upon entering the train. A very common thing you see here in Tel Aviv, in the light rail, in Jerusalem's light rail, in other forms of transportation as well. Okay? Yesh letakef, one must validate. In this case, yesh ledaber, one must speak. Okay, we can understand that to be a form of a command. It's not in the purest of senses, in that it's not daber or tidaber or al tidaber, but in its meaning, right? We're giving a command or an instruction, a firm instruction to someone. Okay. Its opposite is ein ledaber. Ein means there is not. Ein ledaber, one must not speak. You see at the top here, infinitive plus yesh equals one must do something. Infinitive plus ein, one must not do something. In this case, ein ledaber, one must not speak. Okay. And then finally, these two are your friends because you don't have to conjugate anything, right? Yesh and ein do not conjugate, and we're using the infinitive verb, so there's no conjugation involved. This is a great workaround, as we talked about in non-gendered communication, not just to be inclusive, but especially those of you who are having a hard time conjugating verbs. This construct, one must do something, one must not do something, is your friend. You don't have to conjugate. You don't have to think about it. You're giving your brain a break before you have to go back in and conjugate. And then finally, we have the construct al, this time with an ayin, which is the preposition on or about, plus the infinitive. Someone must do something. And because we're talking about the command form, we're doing this only in the second person. Alecha ledaber, you must speak. Instead of one must speak, yesh ledaber, in a general sense, we're being very pointed right now. You, singular masculine, must speak. Alecha ledaber. Alaich ledaber. You, singular feminine, second person. Alechem, with a mem at the end, ledaber. You all, mixed gender, all male, plural, must speak. Alechen, you all female, plural, second person, must speak. Okay. Sorry, just a second. Okay. Okay. So we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ways to indicate a command in Hebrew. 3 that are what we call the classics, right? The imperative conjugation, the future second person, and the negative. And then 3 other ways that we include here, yesh plus the infinitive, ein plus the infinitive, and al plus the infinitive, to further to give us more diversity in our options. Let's look at another example. To go or to get out. To go in Hebrew is lalechet, right? To go. Ani holech lasuper. I am going to the supermarket. Okay, simple as that. If I want to say in Hebrew, lech, go or get out, right? I can use the imperative, lech, lechi, lechu. Okay, go or get out. This is all the, by the way, this is how you would also say to someone in Hebrew, as we talked about before in blessings and curses. Look that class up. How to say in Hebrew, go to hell, right? Lech le azazel is how we say it in Hebrew, right? We have a couple other things that we can say, go do something, but this is how it's formed. Using the imperative form of the verb lalechet, lech, singular masculine, lechi, singular feminine, lechu, mixed plural. Mixed gender plural. You'll notice here a blank. That blank is here on purpose. You will rarely hear telech, telchi, telchu as a command. Lech, lechi, lechu is the more common one to hear for a very simple reason we've talked about many times before. There's actually 2 reasons. One is the reason we've talked about before. One is a more historical one. In ancient Hebrew and in medieval Hebrew, all command forms are done through the imperative, all of them, without exception. And if you look in a verb in a dictionary or in a conjugation table, I'm actually going to show that to you right now. If you go into a verb conjugation table, like our good friend pe'alim, right? And we're going to show you a verb that we're not including tonight. Let's say the verb likro, to read, right? Pe'alim.com, we've talked about this many times. It's a great resource. If I click on likro, and I get the full conjugation of likro, and I pull down, it has the imperative, right? What we were talking about tonight. Read, exclamation point. Look what it has here. Kra, kir'i, kir'u, and it has the old form. As it says here, in modern language, the masculine form is generally used for feminine group, krena. You are almost never going to hear kra, kir'i, and kir'u. There's a bunch of reasons why that is. The point, though, is that in modern Hebrew, chances are the future tense is going to be used much more for the command than anything else. And that's a really important distinction. When you're going through a dictionary, yes, it will be there, but it's also about what you're hearing on the streets, what you're reading in the newspapers, just what you're seeing in general. Lech is used because it has a lot of connotation historically for Jews, right? We know this verb from Bible. We know this verb used in a lot of different ways. It also, we've talked about this before, and this is the other reason. In Hebrew, the fewer syllables and the fewer letters to say the exact same thing, the better. So if you can say lech, go, versus telech, go, one has one syllable, one has two syllables, the one syllable will always win. Okay, one syllable will always win over two. The fewer syllables, the fewer letters, the better in Hebrew. It's considered better Hebrew, right? Better communication in fewer letters and sounds. Lech, lechi, lechu. As a result, I do not have this filled in for to, as in go or get out, in the future second person. However, as you remember our rule about saying don't go, exclamation point, you do have to use that form. Al telech, al telchi, al telchu. Don't go. Al telech, don't go, singular masculine second person. Al telchi, don't go, singular feminine. And al telchu, don't go, plural mixed gendered second person. Okay, let's keep going down this list. Al telchu, yesh lalechet, right? One must go. Ein lalechet, one must not go. And then alecha lalechet, alaich lalechet, alechem lechalechet, alechen lechaleket. You must go. Singular masculine, singular feminine, mixed gender, all male plural, all female plural. Okay, that's how this table works. Very simple in that respect. We're going to look at some other examples here. Now we're going to do go or get moving. The verb is linsoa. The difference between lalechet and linsoa is very simple. Lalechet, row 3, is always for short distances, oftentimes on foot, but short distances within a city, within a neighborhood. Linsoa is to go as in to travel. Okay, it's a farther distance, either by vehicle or a much longer distance. So if you say to someone, if you want to say to someone, go or get moving, you're going to say sa, se'i, or sa'u. Okay, again, this is the imperative form. Sa, se'i, sa'u. You'll also notice, by the way, at the top, it says imperative less polite. If you say to someone sa, it's very impolite. It is very gruff. It is very aggressive to say sa. Okay, it's not going to change if you say tisa, because tisa is not used, the future tense second person. But just note, sa, just like most forms of the imperative, are less polite. You're telling someone to do something, you're ordering, you're commanding someone to do something, don't expect that to be polite. Okay? Sa, se'i, sa'u. If I want to negate it, I just shift over to the next few columns over. Al tis'a, al tis'i, al tis'u. Okay, al tis'a, al tis'i, al tis'u. Don't go, don't travel, don't get moving! Exclamation point. Excuse me. Yesh linsua, one must travel, one must go. Ein linsua, one must not travel. Alecha linsua, you must travel. Aleich linsua, alechem linsua, alechem linsua. Okay, as simple as that. Let's look at another one that uses also the imperative form, zuz. Zuz means to move. Okay, move physically something, yourself, or it's usually when we say to someone zuz, it means move, as in move yourself. Zuz, zuzi, zuzu. Okay, you even hear it, by the way, in the imperative form. It's a very short, truncated word because it's meant to be as powerful as possible with as few letters as possible, right? Imagine saying a command that was several syllables long. By the time it came out of your mouth, the person probably already committed the thing you're telling them to do or not do and have moved on. That's why this imperative form is so sharp and it's less polite. Sa, zuz, lech. Okay? So in this case, move, exclamation point. Zuz, zuzi, zuzu. Future second person, we don't use that to say move, but we will use it to say don't move. Al tazuz, al tazuzi, al tazuzu. Okay, don't move, exclamation point. Yesh lazuz, one must move. Ein lazuz, one must not move. Alecha lazuz, aleich lazuz, alechem lazuz, alechem lazuz, you must move. Okay. Stop in place. We've talked about the difference between the next two verbs before. Okay. We've talked about this before. La'atzor, or la'atzor, or la'atzor, again, however you pronounce the letter resh, means to stop physically in place. That is why the stop signs in Hebrew in Israel say atzor. Literally stop at the intersection. That's what la'atzor means, to stop. From this verb, we, by the way, also get the verb, the meaning to arrest, as in you are stopping someone in the act of doing something. But in this case, you are stopping them in place. La'atzor. La'atzor is heard in both the imperative and the future tense as a command. So to say stop, exclamation point, singular masculine to a man, you would say atzol or ta'atzol. You'll hear both and see both in written and in spoken Hebrew. Itzri or ta'atzri, singular feminine. Itzri, ta'atzri. And then finally, itzru and ta'atzru. I will tell you that in most cases, the imperative singular masculine is the one you're going to hear the most often in the imperative tense, whereas in the future tense, you're going to hear all three of these, right? So if a policeman is telling you to stop, they're going to scream at you, atzol or ta'atzol. They're likely not going to scream at you if you're a woman, itzri or itzru if you're a group of people. They're going to instead say ta'atzri, ta'atzru. We're going to have an upcoming class on crime and the law in a bit. We'll go over this as well. Okay? If I want to say don't stop, al ta'atzor, al ta'atzri, al ta'atzru. Okay, don't stop, exclamation point. One must stop, yesh la'atzor. One must not stop, en la'atzor. And finally, alecha latzor, aleich latzor, alechem latzor, alechem latzor, you must stop. Okay, now we come to one that does not use the imperative. Lahafsik. Lahafsik means to stop doing a specific action, as opposed to la'atzor, which means in place, stop, just stop. Lahafsik is almost always followed by or is implying a specific action. So for example, if someone screams at you, as you see here in the future second person, tafsik, they're telling you to stop doing whatever it is you're doing at the moment. Usually that's something like talking, or interrupting in some way, right? They're not going to say necessarily the verb that you're doing to stop. They're just going to tell you tafsik, stop it. Okay? It's more like stop it. That it is what differentiates lafsik and latzol. Okay? Tafsik, tafsiki, tafsiku. You notice here the imperative is not there. Not because, again, if you were to go into pealim.com and to type in the verb lafsik, it will give you an imperative conjugation for lafsik. Okay? But it's not used. What we talk about in languages is a very important term called register. Register are the words that are actually used in a language that are therefore worth knowing. Just because a word exists in a language doesn't mean it's necessarily used in everyday conversation. And especially considering how many people we have at an introductory level in our classes, it's important to understand that just because the conjugation of lafsik in zman tzivui in the imperative tense exists does not mean it's used. And that's why there's a block here. Again, the default is always going to be the future second person, simply because it's more common, it's easier to do, it's easier to remember to use, even if it's slightly different. In this case, that rule I told you about, being a smaller word always wins out over another word. In this case, I'm not going to tell you the imperative, but just know it's the exact same amount of syllables. Both of them are 2. Okay? So in this case, or the second person masculine is 2, don't worry about it. Point is, it's blank here for a purpose. You're only going to say tafsik. You're only going to hear tafsik. Stop it. If you want to say don't stop, al tafsik, al tafsiki, al tafsiku. Doing a specific action, that is. Yesh lahafsik, one must stop. Ein lahafsik, one must not stop. Alecha, alaich, alechem, or alechen, lahafsik, you must stop, depending on gender and number of people. Okay. 2 more. And then I want to take your questions. I see we have a bunch in the Q&A. It's really this simple. But it's very important when we're trying to convey, in modern Hebrew, to do something or don't do something, to recognize the imperative. Lahatzil. Lahatzil means to save. And when I say to save, it is not to save money. It is not anything other than to save a life or to save, it's really, think of it as a life. This is the verb from which we get the word for lifeguard in Hebrew, matzil, someone who saves. Tachanat Hatzalah is a life-saving station, okay, like a lifeguard station. Lahatzil means to save as in a life. Okay, so this one does have both Hatzel, Hatzili, and most important of all, if you are in Israel during the summer season and you are swimming, or anytime you need to call out for help. Please listen very carefully, folks. We'll do this again when we talk about emergency situations. When you need to call for help, you are outside and you need to get someone's attention, not on your phone, not anything else, using your voice to say help, as you would say in English. In Hebrew, you do not say help. You say hatzilu. I'm going to say that again because I see a bunch of people writing things and I need you to listen very carefully. In Hebrew, in the modern state of Israel, if you need to call for help, not on your phone, not in any other way other than using your voice to get someone's immediate attention that you need help, whether anything, God forbid, is happening to you, you're going to scream out Hatzilu. It means save me, right? And it's in the command form plural conjugation. Anyone out there who's hearing me, all of you, come save me, Hatzilu. Okay, that's how we use this verb. You're not going to hear as much hatzel and hatzili. You're going to hear hatzilu. You'll also hear the future second person, tatzil, tatzili, tatzilu. Okay? Don't save. Al tatzil, al tatzili, al tatzilu. One must save, yesh lahatzil. One must not save. Ein lahatzil, one must not save. And finally, you must save. Alecha la'atzil, alaych la'atzil, alechem la'atzil, alechem la'atzil. Okay. Finally, we're going to do the verb for to behave. The verb behave is lehit naheg. Okay, lehit naheg. So if you want to say to someone, behave, exclamation point, you behave, right? Again, it's blank here on purpose. You're not going to hear it in the imperative. You're going to hear it in the future second person. Tit naheg, singular masculine second person. Tit nagi, singular second person feminine. Tit nagu, singular plural second person mixed gender. Don't behave. Al titnaheg, al titnagi, al titnagu. Yesh lehitnaheg, one must behave. Ein lehitnaheg, one must not behave. Alecha lehitnaheg, you must behave. Aleich lehitnaheg, you must behave. Alechem lehitnaheg, you must behave. Alechem lehitnaheg, you must behave. It really is simple. Once you see the patterns, I always emphasize in these classes and in general when we talk about Hebrew to recognize patterns. 3 of these forms, one must behave, one must do something, one must not do something, and you must do something, all use the infinitive. So there is no need to conjugate. Al does need to change its possessive suffix. Otherwise, these other 2, there's no conjugation. And for the others, whether it's to do something or not do something, we're simply using the future tense. If you haven't learned the future tense, it's okay. We're only talking about commands here, and you can already see a given pattern, right? If it's singular masculine, it's going to begin with the letter taf. If it's singular feminine, it's going to begin with the letter taf and end with the letter yud. And if it's plural second person, it's going to begin with the letter taf and end with the letter vav. Ooh. Okay, that's as simple as it is for the command form. This is, again, really important because you're going to see things, for example, רוצו miyad la Shufersal deal. Run immediately to Supercell deal for the latest sale, right? You're going to hear that in a commercial. It's going to give you some great discount, and it's going to say, Al tachamitsu, don't miss out. Or all sorts of other forms, primarily in commercials, but also in all sorts of other things. If you're on the, like I said, on a bus, on a train, or a light rail, it's going to say things like, Yesh letakef et harav kav be'et aliyah larakevet. One must validate their rav kav, or their ticket, kaltis, upon entering the train, right? That form you're going to hear all the time telling you, instructing you, commanding you to do something. Okay, simple as that. Do some Q&A, and then I'm going to talk about Wednesday's class and next week's class. Can you combine bevakasha with imperative? Not really. You can, in the attempt to be polite, but you can't say, if you say lech bevakasha, go please, they're almost negating each other because lech is very gruff. Bevakasha is please, it's polite. That's a very, I hate to say this, but this is a cross-cultural issue. Lech bevakasha is giving mixed signals. Pick one or the other. How do you know when to use al and when to use lo to negate a verb? I told you exactly that. It's very simple, folks. It's a great question, but it's very simple. I just told you right now to use the word al with an aleph to negate a command. That's it. That's the only time you're ever going to see this word. You are never going to use the word al except in this context with an aleph. That's it. Every other time you're going to negate a verb, for example, behave. You don't behave. Well, no, that doesn't make any sense. You should always behave, right? Don't speak. Don't speak, singular masculine second person, al tidaber. You will not speak, lo tidaber. Okay? Ba'yeshiva ata lo tidaber. In the meeting, you will not speak. Versus al tidaber ba'yeshiva. Don't speak in the meeting, exclamation point. They have two different meanings: don't speak or you will not speak, depending if you're using al, like I said here, which is only for commands, for negating a command, or the negative form of a command, excuse me, versus lo, which simply means don't, okay, or you will not in that case. Great question. Q&A. How do you negate the imperative? Can you do, I just explained that, someone got ahead of me. I love your enthusiasm, folks, but let me explain before you jump to conclusions. Will you cover colloquial exceptions like halachnu? A great reminder, folks, please watch our previous lessons. We did a whole class on non-gendered communication, including expressions like halachnu and zaznu and hayinu. That was several weeks ago. Non-gender communication, it's in there. Asur ledaber, great question. We talked about it is forbidden to speak in our, or permitted to speak in our non-gendered communication class. Again, great reminder, please watch over our previous lessons. Asur ledaber can be thought of as a command. In Hebrew, it's not. It really isn't. It's thought of as a request. It's thought of as anything but a demand. I added yesh and ein because of its sound when you're speaking, but asur ledaber, it's forbidden to speak. Yes, that sounds to us as English speakers as a command. In Hebrew, it's technically not. If fewer syllables is always better, why the imperative not always used? So like I explained, it's a historical shift. The imperative clause is just simply less used unless it's a verb that's has been used all this time in Jewish communities. That's usually the case. It's not always, but the imperative is not often used. Also because of how not only gruff it is, it's actually very formal sounding. If I were to use the imperative form of the verb lehafsik, and I said that on the street, people would look at me like I thought I was in 1920. It sounds very old-fashioned. Simply to use the future second person in the vast majority of cases, even if you mess up. If you say telech instead of lech, it's okay. But if you say the imperative form of lehafsik instead of tafsik, people are going to look at you like, where is your powdered wig and your Shakespearean era outfit? It looks and sounds old-fashioned. Lalechet means to go. Remember what I just said about lalechet versus linsoa, and why this person who's writing in thinks it means to walk, right? Lalechet baregel means to walk, to literally go on foot. Regel is both foot and leg. Lalechet baregel means to walk. Lalechet is to go a short distance. Linsoa is to go a long distance. They both mean to go. Okay, you can think of lalechet as to go and linsoa as to travel, but in Hebrew, these both mean to go. Can you just say afshal plus the infinitive? No, you cannot. That is not the command form. Again, we're talking about command, folks. I know cross-culturally, it sounds impolite to say something with an exclamation point, but afshal plus the infinitive is the same thing as saying the infinitive plus bivakasha. You're being too polite. I love politeness, but you're being too polite. You cannot say efshar lahafsik. It's very passive aggressive. Could you please stop? That's how you say it in America or in other native English speaker lessons. If you're saying it in Hebrew like that, you are being very passive aggressive. Versus tafsik, stop. Two very different ways of communicating. One's no less important than the other, but we're only talking about the command form today. Aleinu lazuz, no. Very important point. What is in common with all of these words we went through today, especially in this column? First off, what's common in all of these? This gives you the very big clue here. In Hebrew, command form is only the second person you. There is no other form that's considered the command form in Hebrew. Suggestions, yes. Encouragement, instruction even, but it is not the command form. Only the second person is. Alecha, aleich, alechem, alechen, all mean you. You cannot conjugate this for anything else and for it to mean a command that someone must do something. Okay? I can conjugate al, the preposition on or about, in every form. Alai, alecha, alav, aleha, alenu, alehem, alehen. But those other forms that aren't the second person, secular, singular, or plural, mean a command. Great question. Do parents usually use the infinitive, rows B and C, when talking to the kids rather than the future second person? Great question. You'll hear both. You'll hear tafsik said to a kid very commonly. You won't necessarily hear the imperative always. It really varies, but the future second person, absolutely you'll hear as a command between a parent and their child. How do we say help? I'm going to show you it again, folks. And I will include the transliteration when this goes out, so don't worry about that. I will add that in here. It's even here already. Hatzilu. Hatzilu means help in Hebrew, literally save me. Okay? Hatzilu. Hatzilu, imperative form, plural of the verb lahatzil, to save. That's how we say help in Hebrew. Not the general meaning of the word help, help exclamation point, right? Because we're only talking about commands today. Excuse me. What is the negative form of you must not do something? Alecha lo naheg. You don't really hear that. If you were going to say one must not do something, it's ein plus the infinitive. How do you conjugate a verb following lahafsik, as in stop hitting your brother? Tafsik la'kot et ha'achshacha. In Hebrew, just like in other languages, one verb following the other verb, the following verbs will always be in the infinitive. It's very easy. So if I say tafsik ledaber, stop talking. Tafsik la'afriya lo, stop bothering him. Tafsik litzok, stop screaming, right? The command tafsik, stop, followed by the imperative, the infinitive of whatever I'm telling them to stop doing. Tafsik tafsik likhtov, stop writing. Okay. If I need help in the, okay, let me get to questions that only have to do with this class first and then have time for the others. How do you say you must not stop? Al tatzor or al tafsik. Right? We had that. Don't stop. All right. Don't stop, depending on its context. Don't stop. Al tatzor or al tafsik. Right? Al tatzor as in you're in a car and the person guiding you outside of the car is telling you don't stop, whether you're reversing or going forward. Versus al tafsik, stop doing a specific action. Don't stop doing a specific action in this case, right? Al tatzor, don't stop. Al tafsik, don't stop it, or don't stop doing something. Right? Does the verb for behave have the same shoresh as the verb for to drive? Yes, it does. Linhog means to drive. Lahit naheg means to behave. When giving a command, most of the time, can you use the infinitive? How about naledaber? No, naledaber is please speak. That is not a command. Please is not a command. Great question, but that is not a command technically. Again, command is only the second form. I appreciate you all conjugating other forms, but in Hebrew, commands are only in the second person you. They are not I, we, they, anything else. You can only command someone directly in Hebrew. Okay. Um, what are the Hebrew commands to the IDF soldiers? That is a whole other lesson. We've done some classes on IDF commands. A lot of those are going to be in the tzivui, by the way, in the command form that are unique to the military. Even people who grew up in Israel speaking Hebrew won't necessarily use those outside of a military context, and such you learn them during it. So, for example, if you watch any official military ceremony, a funeral, memorial, whatever it may be, or honor guard, they use certain commands to tell the soldiers who are the honor guard where to stand, where to put their gun, and things like that. Those are all in the imperative, tzivui. Great question. I want to differentiate between help as an emergency command and help to a salesperson or civilian situation. We've gone over that before. Hatzilu is emergency. Slicha is the best way to get someone's attention if it's non-emergency. Excuse me, right? Slicha means excuse me. Okay. Is come on, let's go. That is not a command in Hebrew. Again, only second person is considered a command in Hebrew. We went over how to say let's go in our non-gendered communication class. Zaznu, halachnu, hayinu. Please review that class for more details. If a policeman would use singular female for everyone to stop, no, they'll say tatzru. To a group of people, they'll say stop, plural, or they'll simply say atzol or tatzol to a single person, male, but to a female, they'll say tatzri. They're not going to say itzri. That's very old-fashioned Hebrew. You're not going to hear it. You're going to hear more likely future second person. Um, Okay, you need to stop here because we're running out of time. I want to give you what we're doing in our conversation class and then next week's class. So first off, toda rabba, thank you all for joining. Wednesday's conversation class, we're going to keep going with commands. And you're going to, those of you who are signed up for Wednesday's class already or have in the past, and whether you can join or not, you're going to be asked if you're in Israel to find an example of a command using the different formulations we just went through. You'll see them on printed signs, maybe online. So use your camera, use your computer, and be able to share them with your group. And then together in your class, excuse me, in your breakout room, you're going to create your own sivui. The word sivui comes from the same root as the verb, as the word mitzvah, commandment, right? Remember a commandment, folks? Mitzvah is a commandment, not a good deed. Absolutely not the same thing. Mitzvah in modern Hebrew means a commandment, something you must do or something you must not do. One of the classic ones we talk about here at Nefesh B'Nefesh, and in general in teaching Hebrew, modern Hebrew for use in everyday Israeli life, is the one that in slang, but using the imperative form, al tetze frayer. Thou shalt not become a frayer, a pushover. That is considered the 11th commandment in Israeli society. Thou shalt not be a frayer. If you want to say it using this form and drawing on Jewish tradition, al tetze frayer. It's slang, but it's understood. Thou shalt not become a friar. You shall not become one. You're going to use that construct and any of the other ones using your own wisdom. Having made aliyah, thinking about making aliyah, you're going to take some conventional wisdom of your own or as the group, and you're going to translate it together using one of the command forms to create your own mitzvah that you're going to share with the rest of us. Think of this mitzvah as common wisdom or telling someone to absolutely do something or absolutely not do something, but it's going to be a tzivui, a command in the same sense. I'll explain it again, both in the email and in Wednesday's class if you forget. Next week's class is going to be a another very popular class, and we're going to put grammar aside for a week, which is reading and paying bills. We're going to pick a bill at random, and we're going to teach you how to read it and how to pay it. A very important life skill anywhere, but especially in Israel, even at the most rudimentary level of your Hebrew, how to read and pay your bills is a life-saving situation, as we talked about today. With that, toda rabah, thank you all for joining. If you wrote to us in the chat, we will be looking over the chat transcript in the next day or so. In the meantime, this recording will go up on YouTube in the next day or two and will be sent out by email. Until our next class, both on Wednesday and Cafe Oleh next week. Toda rabah, thank you all, and lehitraot. See you all very soon.